June 9th is the final major sandbox update for Destiny 2, and I feel two things simultaneously. Excitement and caution. On the positive side, a lot of long-standing problem children are finally getting addressed. Things like Precision Instrument on rapid-fire scouts and Adagio on 120 hand cannons are being toned down, and overall, Bungie is clearly trying to reduce some of the ability and perk synergy that's built up in PvP for a long time. As a PvP player, that's something I've wanted for a while, but I think we're entering a really unusual situation. A lot of these changes feel like they'd be perfect for a normal DLC or a big sandbox patch. The drops, the meta shifts, and players adapt. Then a few months later, Bungie comes back and reins in whatever has become too strong. The difference now is that this may be the last major sandbox update we get, or the last balance patch we get. And that changes how I look at everything. Voidwalk is a good example. It's already very strong and impressive at what it does. And now it's being pushed even further. I don't think it needed that, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up as one of the top 3 PvP subclasses, just off raw consistency and ability uptime alone. Dawnblade is more straightforward. It's already one of the fastest subclasses, and it's getting faster. The interaction between Burst Glide and Heat Rises and Icarus Dash removes a lot of the old trade-offs. What used to be a choice between mobility is now stacking into a single kit. That means faster rotations, faster disengages, faster re-engages. In PvP, that level of movement is a huge advantage, and it's not something you can ignore. Even small differences in speed decides fights at high levels. Knockout is another case where the nerf doesn't remove the power. Yes, they reduced the lunge range on that melee, and I wish they would have done it on all melees, including Arc Hunter and Glaive melee. But the aspect does so much. You can get orbs off of it. You can get super energy with the helmet mod off of it, because even though it's not a charged melee, it behaves as one. It still is going to give you the damage buff, and on Prismatic it gives you amplified. It's not just a melee perk, it's a full neutral engine. So even after the changes, I still expect it to be one of the strongest aspects in the game. And I'm not fully convinced of why we're making DR easier to get through armor sets, or frost armor being easier to get on all classes and then it decaying slower stack by stack. I think that the more DR you have in the game, the harder it is to punish players, the windows get tighter, and it also tends to slow down engagements and makes clarity and high level play hazy. Then there's build crafting, which I think is one of the best parts of Destiny 2. But unfortunately, the problem is, strong build crafting always comes with the risk of outliers, and before those outliers would get addressed, and right now, it looks like if some of these outliers stay in the game, they're here forever. And if certain combinations end up too efficient, PvP can quickly shift into whatever the most abusive setup is, rather than a diverse sandbox. In a game like Destiny, people are never going to agree on what fair is. The bubble changes are the biggest example of that tension. On one hand, they look incredibly fun. Being able to pick up your bubble and throw it creates a lot of creative options. Closing distance, forcing space, disrupting fights, or swinging objectives. But it also raises serious questions for objective PvP. We already lived through eras where Bubble and Well of Radiance dominated trials. And the new version doesn't just place a defensive space, it actively moves fights into it, and that's why I think Bubble and Well should not be placeable directly on capture zones in zone trials. Not because they're unfun, but because matches shouldn't be decided by which team gets their objective super first. What worries me most is how the new Bubble pulls players into close range. If it lands on a zone or into a team fight, you're not just dealing with the super itself, you're being forced into its win condition. And in a glaive or melee focused fight, that gets even more extreme. Maybe it'll be fine, maybe the counters are enough, but that's exactly my point. We really don't know how much follow-up balancing will exist going forward, and that uncertainty is what shapes how I see this entire patch. My concern isn't that strong things exist. Destiny has always had strong things. My concern is whether anything gets adjusted if those strong things become problems later. And that's really where I land with the sandbox update. Feels exciting, it feels expressive, but it also feels like a moment where stability matters more than ever. When it comes to Destiny 3, I'm honestly uncertain if I even want it to happen. And I want to be clear about that. It's not coming from a place of negativity or trying to shut down excitement. I understand why people are hyped about it. I see the discussions, I see the comments, and I see how quickly we want D3 becomes the answer whenever people think about the future of the franchise. In a lot of ways, I get it, but my hesitation comes from what we've seen in Destiny 2 over the last few years. I feel like Bungie as a studio has incredibly talented developers and an incredibly strong community around the game. But at the same time, the direction and leadership of Destiny 2 over the last several years has felt inconsistent and plainly bad. There has been moments where the game is at its absolute best, and then it shifts, and that leaves the community split or unsure of where things are going. I'm so tired of them having their back against the wall and cooking. I'd rather them just be a consistent average. So when I think about Destiny 3, my concern is pretty simple. I don't know if a reset automatically fixes that, because of the same leadership decisions and design philosophies carry over, then a new game doesn't necessarily solve my core issues with it. It just starts the cycle over again. And there's another part of it that I think people don't always talk about. Destiny as a game has a lot of history now, a lot of identity, a lot of systems built up over years. And one of my worries is that by the time a Destiny 3 would be actually greenlit, developed, released, a lot of the people who made Destiny feel the way it does right now, the people who understand its movement, the sandbox identity, its PvP rhythm, might not even be working on it anymore. They might have moved on to other studios, other projects, other games. And at that point, it may not feel like Destiny anymore, even if it carries the same name. That's the part that makes me hesitate the most. Because I do love seeing the excitement. I love seeing people spam D3 and get hyped about a fresh start. There's something really positive about the energy and inspirational in the community. I just don't fully share it. Not because I don't want Destiny to evolve, but because I'm not convinced that starting over guarantees we get something better than what we already have, even with all its flaws. And finally, I also want to talk about something that's been bothering me a lot lately. The way Destiny and Marathon communities have been interacting with each other. I've seen Destiny players crapping on Marathon and Marathon players crapping on Destiny. And honestly, it just feels like everyone is losing in that situation. It turns into a us versus them argument, when in reality both games come from the same studio and both communities are made of people who care about Bungie's work and Bungie's games. If there's going to be an us versus them scenario, it should be Bungie players versus Bungie leadership and Sony leadership. That is it. And a lot of the logic behind the sentiment I've been seeing online, it just doesn't hold up. Hating on Destiny isn't going to produce Destiny 3. It didn't work for Titanfall 3. Hating on Apex now won't get you Titanfall 3. If they make it, they make it. And hating on Marathon isn't going to improve Destiny 2. It just creates this loop where players are angry at each other instead of focused on the actual decisions shaping the games. And what's been confusing to me is how this sometimes gets framed as a positive movement. Because it does feel mostly like a positive movement. It's inspirational. I love seeing the D3 in the different chats. And I love seeing the people band together. But somehow they think that energy will translate into the outcome they want. But in the same breath, those same people are tearing down Marathon as an IP or attacking people who play it or enjoy it. I don't really see how those two ideas fit together. If the goal is we want Destiny 3, then it doesn't make sense to also be actively trying to damage another Bungie project at the same time. Because Marathon didn't replace anything, it didn't choose to exist instead of something else in a vacuum. It's a project made by developers, many of whom, from what we've seen over the years, wanted to build things differently, whether that was a Destiny 3, an expansion, or release Marathon earlier instead of at the same time as they announced the final patch, basically. And I want to be clear, this isn't about saying you have to play Marathon. Well, where I think it's the best extraction shooter ever made, if you don't like extraction shooters, that's completely fine and understandable. It's a niche genre. It never should have been a flagship game, and I don't think that was the intention of the developers, even if that's where we're at now. I'm not saying you should force yourself to enjoy it, but there's a difference between not playing something and actively wanting it to fail. That's where it starts to feel counterproductive. Because this idea of trying to pressure outcomes through negativity, whether that's Destiny 3 or Marathon failing or Bungie changing direction, doesn't really reflect how any of this actually works. At best, it just creates noise. At worst, it turns into a personal attacks on people who had nothing to do with those decisions, and that's the part that feels off to me. It would be like being angry at someone for preferring PlayStation over Xbox, or liking one game more than the other, and treating that as if that's something to attack something or someone over. It feels tribal. It feels barbaric. At the end of the day, these are just preferences. Different games, different experiences, different audiences. Turning that into a personal conflict between players doesn't really make sense, and I recommend you go outside and touch some grass. Especially when underneath all of it, most people just want good games to play. And honestly, this whole thing reminds me of when you hear people hoping a couple breaks up so your crush becomes available, thinking that somehow increases your chances of ending up together. But even if that happens, that doesn't mean they'll want to be with you or they'll want to date soon. It doesn't guarantee the outcome you actually want. And most of the time, you're just left frustrated over something you've never had control over in the first place. That's how it feels to me. And I understand this isn't a popular opinion. I'm sure some of you will be annoyed by it. But I would hope that you keep it civil, and I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Quack quack mother duckers. Peace. Don't be wrong, join the pond. Quack quack mother duckers.